Okay, Elder, get started.
Ok. Bom, eu gostaria primeiramente de agradecer a presença de todo mundo, né, aqui nessa sessão. Dizer que a gente está muito feliz, né, primeiramente, pelo fato do Aren Noronha ter aceito o nosso convite de falar sobre o livro, né, sobre o Lusophone Goa Tracing the Portuguese Language, né, que é o que ele acaba de lançar pela editora do nosso querido colega Frederic Noronha, né, Goa, 1556, e também dizer, falar muito brevemente assim da importância dessa iniciativa, né, de um pesquisador tão jovem. Então, o que nos impressionou, Aren, foi justamente a sua juventude e a sua capacidade de levar a cabo um projeto desses, né? Foi muito bacana. Logo que eu vi, quando você postou no nosso grupo lá do Pensando Goa, eu fiquei bastante impressionado com o trabalho. Primeiro porque eu acho que é um trabalho que reúne um conjunto de depoimentos ou de ensaios, né? O que a gente vinha falando aqui antes de começar a sessão, né? É um livro que tem vários gêneros textuais, mas que traz e que, portanto, aborda a questão da língua em Goa, ou do destino, ou do momento mais crítico, talvez assim, do português em Goa, aborda isso de formas bastante diferentes, né? Por vários de várias perspectivas, tanto mais acadêmicas quanto mais pessoais. E isso vira uma fonte privilegiada, né, para estudar a história da língua portuguesa em Goa. Nesse sentido, eu acho que teu texto é um texto que vai ser utilizado de várias maneiras, né? Ele pode, as pessoas podem chegar a esse texto e utilizá-lo de formas muito diferentes e muito produtivas. Daí a importância. E para nós que somos, que trabalhamos no campo da academia e que trabalhamos e que não somos goeses, né, que não fazemos parte dessa história, e para quem é mais difícil ter a percepção do como o português, o lugar que o português ficou, não ficou, né, depois mas ficou, né? O que está demonstrado é que ficou depois ah, da integração de Goa à Índia, para a gente é fundamental, né? Porque a gente não teria um material dessa natureza em outro lugar. Então, eu estou muito ansioso para poder ler esses textos. Eu, de fato, não tive como, né? Eu agradeço o livro e que você me enviou, mas eu, de fato, ainda não consegui. Estamos no início do semestre aqui, é o inferno, né? Mas logo que eu puder, sim, vou conseguir me dedicar a isso. E é isso, queria parabenizá-lo pela iniciativa e vou passar a palavra para a Cielo para que ela apresente adequadamente, porque afinal eu só me meti aqui porque fui eu que fiz o contato com você primeiramente, mas a Cielo é a dona desses.
Of course, I'm not. We organize everything together, Elder.
Ela é a chefe, aquela
Of course not. Everybody knows it's not true. So come
então
on.
eu
Stop pretending.
vou passar a palavra para ela.
Uh,
Ok, Cielo, por
well,
favor.
so thank you, Elder. So just for those of you who are just meeting Aren for the first time, I don't know. So Aren Noronha is currently a master's student of Portuguese and Lusophone studies at Goa University. He has a bachelor's degree in mass communication and is curious about Indo-Portuguese studies, intercultural studies, and media. In his free time, he creates electronic music, plays the piano and guitar, as well as dabbles in open source software and computer tools. He loves reading, learning new things, and encountering diverse cultures. So, Aren, you're most welcome to our sessions of Pensando Goa.
Muito
Please.
obrigado.
De nada,
Thank you very
prazer ter
much.
você aqui.
Thank you very much. Muito obrigado doutora Cielo, doutor Helder, pela convite a esta sessão de Pensando Goa. Uh, Hoje eu vou apresentar uma breve apresentação sobre o livro Lusophone Goa. Um momento, vou... Okay, can you see it?
No. Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. And I hope I'm audible as well.
Yes, yes, we
Yes.
can see you too.
Okay, okay. Okay, so, respeitados professores e os meus amigos, today I will present bilingually on this. So I'll be speaking in English and presenting in the slides will be in Portuguese. So I hope that's fine with everyone. Okay,
Perfect.
yeah. So let's begin then. So this will be a presentation about the book, the essays in the book, as well as the themes that show up throughout the book. And I'll talk briefly on these things. So to begin, uh, what is the book about? The book it's a collective intellectual project by Goans on the Portuguese language in Goa after 1961 and after the integration of Goa into the Indian Union. And so it features voices from different generations, spanning from ages of 19 years to 90 years, and many in between as well. It features people from various geographies. There are many from Goa, currently residing in Goa, as well as many from the diaspora, uh, such as the Lusophone countries, and even some from the Anglophone countries, like the United States and Canada. And there are also a diverse range of perspectives on on the language in Goa, and even outside of Goa in the diaspora. And I think what's really good about it is it having this diversity and having everything, all things into account. It really brings up a lot of diverse topics, not just about the language itself, but about many various different things related to the language, such as migration, diaspora, um, people's life journeys and stories. And so it's not just an intellectual project. It's not just, say, research studies, although we do have two research papers at the end. It's more lived experiences, people recounting their lived experiences with the language. And so the focus tends to be language as identity, as memory, and as strategy. There's a lot of pragmatism as well. There's a lot of, some are very emotive, very intimate essays inside the book. So it's 45 essays, 45 chapters, 45 essays from various people, and mostly Goans, primarily almost all of them are Goans. And it one of the key idea behind it is also that Portuguese functions as a social archive of Goan experience. And also as a key to the Lusophone world. And so just to show you the blurb of the book, I just thought I'd show you. This is just the what's on the back of the book over here. Uh, it 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 talks about language memory and post-colonial inheritance inheritance in Goa and in the diaspora. And so it really it's just to show you that, you know, this is what the back of the book says, that there are diverse and conflicting voices. The that it shows the Portuguese language as a lasting, if pressured, centuries old legacy of the Portuguese language, and also tells you that there are first person lively accounts throughout the book that you can find. And it spans generations, geographies, personal histories, emigration realities, and communities. So, but the main thing of the book is the contributors, if you ask me. And there are many of us, many of the contributors in this book are here with us today. If I can briefly, uh, okay, first I'll just talk about who's in the book. So we have a Lisbon-based academician, uh, Dr. Sandra Ataid Lobo. We have historians such as Dr. Delio Mendonça, Dr. Sharmila Pace, Dr. Lutz Bravo da Costa, who have all written chapters in this book, as well as professors and teachers of Portuguese in Goa, and such as Professor Dhruv, Professor Lorraine, Athos, Jeanette, and Cecil de Mello. We have playwrights and scholars of literature, such as Dr. Isabel Santarita Vaz and Dr. Father Eufemiano Miranda. We have librarians, Liria Maria de Souza and Maria Pia. We have medical doctors and professors, Dr. Carlos Perez da Costa and Dr. Antonio Gomes. Sociologist Jason Keith Fernandez also writes a chapter, as well as documentary filmmaker Nalini Souza. There are many others as well, including musicians and creatives like Dilip Shiko, Vince Costa, Dr. Luis Dias, Omar Loyola Pereira. There's translator Xavier Cotter, engineers Olio Martins, Jaime de Mello, Sergio de Sá, Amit Baya, Edgar João, José Lourenço, and also architect Joseph Dias, and professionals Carolina da Costa, Mark Pinto, Bennett Pace, Sister Noemia Souza, René Mendes, Ben Antão, Antonio Fonseca, Fátima M. Noronha, Graça Costa, Antonio Lobo, Nelly Velho Pereira, Luis F. Figueiredo, and there's also students of Portuguese, such as stories from Joanne de Silva, Sanika Velikar, and Dhruvan Nair. So this is just to show you that there's a lot of people and a lot of varying different perspectives on the language. I'd also like to recognize that here with us today we have Edgar João, currently present here, Edgar João from the book, Isabel Vaz, Xavier Cotta, uh, Grasa Costa is also here with us. Greetings to all of them. Jeanette Noronha, and Sandra Ataid Lobo, of course, Dr. Sandra. So there are many of them here with us today, a few of them. Moving on. Uh, so yeah, I'd like to also just discuss. Well, no, the next section of the presentation that I'd like to discuss will be on the themes that show up throughout the book. These are just I just thought I'd pick up some themes, some central themes that show up across the various chapters, and so I will be talking on that now. The central themes, two of them to start off with, include the post 1961 language shift and language loss. So this basically again, before I get into all this, because it'll be quite a bit, I just want to emphasize that, the book, the devil is in the details with this book. It really is a book which you really have to read into the details, read the individual chapters from the authors to really actually get to know what this is, what shows up in the book, and this is just sort of me trying to distill some patterns in it for you. So yeah, with the language shift and loss, many talk about the institutional withdrawal of Portuguese, and how the Portuguese language was withdrawn from institutions, from schools in Goa, and how this created a rupture in Portuguese language teaching. There was a shift towards Indian languages and English primarily, the shift towards English. Transmission within families interrupted or weakened. And so another theme that shows up is education and language acquisition. So many people do talk about this. And they do mention that there's a after current revival in present times, which exists, although it is limited, which mainly occurs in the universities and in the schools, such as the Goa University and more. Cultural institutions like Camões, Fundação Orient, and the Indo-Portuguese Friendship Society also help this. Um, then many people talk about the complex relationship between Portuguese and Konkani. Oh, excuse me for a second. So yeah, many people who spoke Portuguese were bilingual. And so many would speak Portuguese, Konkani, and later on even English. And there was a segmented bilingualism that was shaped by the social order at the time. Across the book, in some chapters, also themes of hierarchy, elitism, and stratification show up in various ways. Basically, language functioned as a symbolic capital in a stratified colonial society. And when it comes to mother tongue and domestic languages, Portuguese Portuguese was quite a quite a present language in the homes of many of the speakers. It was a heritage language for others as well in some other families. Where this meant that it was not actively used or transferred, or it was not transferred over to the next generation so much. I'll just run through these really fast because there's quite a few of them. I hope it's not an issue for anyone. Um, the diaspora and global ties, that shows up in quite a lot of the chapters where people do have ties to the diaspora and have experiences of migration, where basically migration created transnational Portuguese networks and also intellectual and emotional continuities showed up in such cases. Then multilingualism also comes up a lot, multilingualism as an everyday reality where people spoke Portuguese, Konkani, English uh, in their daily lives. And in some chapters, such as I believe Dr. Carlos also talks about learning from textbooks in Spanish, English, and French in the Escola Medica in Goa. And so, yeah, coming back to migration and multiculturalism, um, I think the main thing over here is that Portuguese also functioned as a bridge language in the case of Lusophone countries. But in Anglophone and non-Lusophone countries, it worked more as an intra-community language or as a symbolic marker of identity. The language also worked as a cultural mediator in some cases. Um, Now to come to infancy, memory, and generational experience. Sorry, childhood memory and generational experience. The language is remembered in through through songs, through sounds, through sound, sorry, through ritual and through schooling. And I think one of the main takeaways to this theme is we could say that Portuguese today exists in Goa across the spectrum as a living language for some and as an emotional or inherited memory for others. Although for the non-Lusophone Goa, the relationship is less central. Although many Portuguese words survive today through Konkani, I believe there's about 2,000 Portuguese words in the Konkani language. Um, then when it comes to revitalization, institutions, and political rupture, um, I think there was definitely an institutional rupture that happened that shows up through the chapters. Many people talk about there not being Portuguese as an option in schools after 1961 for many years. And so they did not have that option, which maybe later opened up in the 80s or 90s. And later revival of the Portuguese language, including present revival, is also driven by pragmatic global positioning, such as India being in BRICS with Brazil, and the EU trade agreement is also something else that comes up, and such pragmatism uh, and optimism also does show up in the book throughout the chapters where people talk about, like for example, the vast potential that Portuguese has, and and how we should be using it more. So yeah, also academic research needs such as work in archives. Portuguese works in a big way to grant access to working in these areas, and also it's Portuguese is increasingly reframed not as a colonial remnant, but as a strategic, linguistic, and intellectual resource. So that brings us to professional use. I think many of the chapters in the book, people are people do talk about their professional journeys through the Portuguese language. Like Rene Mendes talks about his long stint in tourism in Goa, how he would often handle the Portuguese speaking tourists. So that's just to give you one example. Then there's also many professors and educators. There's so yeah, not to go too much into the details there. Portuguese has supported careers in it supports careers in tourism, education, documentary filmmaking, and media, and also global cultural industries as well. Um, then to come to decline narratives versus pragmatic reassessment. This is sort of, I think, one of the fights that come up in the book. Not fights, but rather there's a sort of a dialectical, that we could say, between these two, where some essays express melancholy and loss and the decline of the language in Goa, whereas others emphasize the utility of the language, the mobility and the opportunities that it brings, and also the pragmatic potential of Portuguese for Goa and India. When it comes to the themes of colonial power and nationalism, and also critique of the colonial government, and also maybe the present government as well, there are a few instances of this that pop up throughout the essays. Um, Yeah, there was a complex relationship, I think, between these things. And a few essays do reveal character arcs going from Indian nationalism, or maybe such views in the early days, or a rejection of the Portuguese language, which then arcs sort of into an appreciation for the Portuguese language later on. Some chapters also reflect ambivalence rather than uniform rejection. Um, yeah, so there's also a spectrum of competencies in when it comes to Portuguese. There's a spectrum of um, when it comes to the language, we have the chapters include people who are fluent from the language, grew up speaking it since childhood. Some are partial speakers who only know it partially. Some are passive speakers, and some are non-speakers as well. So but it can also go the other way, because there are many people who are learners of the language currently, and so it can go both ways. Then, when it comes to heritage, archives, and cultural residue, Portuguese persists through names. Portuguese persists in Goa through various, we can say, cultural vestiges. In a way, it persists in the names of people over here and the surnames, and also the orthography. Like I think this is interesting, but many Hindu names also are written with Portuguese orthography. You'll occasionally see some here in Goa, like Kamoti and such. The architecture and the built heritage is also another vestige. Then there are roughly 2,000 Portuguese words in Goan Konkani, the words that originate from Portuguese or just straight up come out of Portuguese. Like you hear people saying cuidado sometimes when they speak Konkani or Oculus or various other vocabulary, and also culture, literature, and music. And so these also pop up, these themes, these things pop up throughout the chapters. And it's also, these things are also essential for archival research and historical reconstruction of, what has remained and what has remained visible rather. And yeah, then the theme of Goan uniqueness also comes up in comparative perspectives, we can say. And Goa is a Lusophone layered cultural space. Portuguese here serves as a cultural bridge and also a gateway to other Romance languages for some. This is more for learners, but yes. Um, and the contemporary strategic relevance of Goa today is another theme that also does pop up quite a bit. That is Portuguese as a mobility language throughout the Lusophone world, to the Lusophone world, and also the translation economy that exists for Goans and Indians learning Portuguese today in Goa. Um, and yeah, just to bring this to a conclusion, uh, I think you can say that the book shows that the Portuguese language is not simply disappearing or fading in Goa, and for some that's not the case at all. But for most, it's taking on it's taking on new meanings through memory, migration, and modernity. And yeah, that's all. Thank you. I
Thank
think we
you,
can.
Aren, for the wonderful presentation. Yes, and for putting together this wonderful book. Yes, very interesting. So, and we're going to start now with the questions. And we already have one question in the chat. So, people, whoever is willing to make questions, just put up your hand and go ahead. But first, I'm going to read a question from Heta Pandit. Heta says that in the book, several writers have said that Portuguese was a code language between parents when they did not want their children to listen in. Leaving that in the stories, was that deliberate, or did you expect your readers to see a pattern here on their own?
Yeah, so that's also interesting. Yeah, some have said that it worked as a code language. We did not remove, I didn't remove anything from the book that people said really. It is mostly like everything that's in there has been said quite freely. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think it's for readers to come up with their own patterns, as you say, to see their own patterns throughout the book, and to hopefully gain an understanding from these micro details really that show up through people expressing their experiences and their life journeys. Yes. I hope
Excellent.
that answers the question.
Sure. People, you just can leave the questions in the chat or just speak up. I have a second question by Natasha, but then people feel free to speak up and ask your questions. Natasha says, in the essays, did you observe any connection between religion and the Portuguese language?
Yes, that is a theme actually that does show up a few times. Many people do connect the Portuguese language with religion. Um, uh, how do I say in different ways really, and there's no one way of boiling it down, but I think obviously it was connected to prayers and Catholicism, and Mass was said in Portuguese, and some recall their parents praying in Portuguese. And it's almost like a language that their parents would revert back to in some cases again. Um, but yeah, it shows up in many ways, I would say, and religion is an interesting one.
Excellent.
So, can I say
Oh,
something?
Jojo, would you like to make your question? You can speak up. No?
Okay,
Then I'm
okay.
going.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, perfectly. Hello.
Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, I just threw in that on the chat. What I also realized was as I was growing up, uh, the Portuguese speaking Christians would somehow set themselves apart from the other castes. Like they were always putting the Portuguese people or Portuguese speaking people into a caste bracket which was higher. And those who are not speaking Portuguese, they were automatically kind of treated like, oh, you are not part of our group. And maybe it is still happening, but to a lesser extent. But this has happened. And I have many people. Second part is that I have many people who are known to me who actually decided to ban speaking Portuguese in their homes because of this. They just didn't like to speak Portuguese. They just wanted to keep to Konkani. I just wanted to make this statement. I don't know if others agree with it or would like to share on it.
Sure, people, feel free to share. Anybody from Aren or the other members of the audience, especially the writers in the book, please go ahead, please. Thank you, Jojo.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think it does it come I not exactly that, but it does come across the idea of elitism, and um, maybe it was used in some ways that people would consider to be elitist or hierarchical, or something. Things like that do show up throughout the book, I think. But as for caste, I'm not so sure about if it's so explicitly said. But it's an interesting question for sure. But to be honest with you, I haven't really thought about it so much myself, specifically when it comes to caste. But yeah.
Probably you feel it more in Margao or some parts of Panjim that you will experience this kind of segregation, which is probably elitist. Yeah, as you said.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So elitism
Yes.
does come up a few times, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is my name is Luis Figueredo from Los Angeles, California. I just want to comment. Somebody said earlier that.
Luis, could you speak up a little bit? Thank
Okay,
you.
sure.
Just a little bit, so we can hear you well.
I wanted to, I wanted to respond to to what somebody else said some before regarding the code language when speaking Portuguese. Obviously, that implies that the children didn't know Portuguese, and that means that that applies only to households in which Portuguese was not the language of choice. So it's not the case of every family because there are families that spoke Portuguese regularly amongst themselves, and obviously the children also knew it. And it's not necessarily elitist because, for instance, in my own case, my father was from Goa, my mother was from Damon, and when they married, my mother didn't know Konkani. So the only common language between them, my father was a medical doctor, my mother was a school teacher, both of them educated in the Portuguese system. The only common language was Portuguese. So I grew up in a Portuguese speaking household. It's not necessarily elitist. We are from Margao. I grew up in Margao. And for first 5 years in Daban and then in Margao. So I just happened to be a Portuguese speaking household in which if my parents spoke in Portuguese, it would not be a code language because I could understand everything they said, and so did my siblings. That's what I just wanted to comment.
Thank you.
Right,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's interesting. I think there's many ways of interpreting it and many varying experiences. Again, it's very nuanced, and I can't comment much on it myself.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Cielo, there are questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes. I have seen that. So
Cielo,
just
I had another question, Cielo.
Okay, go
time.
ahead, and then we go to Natasha. Go ahead, please, Tejeta,
No,
please.
please. Natasha
No, go ahead. No problem.
Okay.
Sonali,
Aren, this is out of the book, actually. After the British left, we stayed with English, although it was a colonial language. Today, you have edited a book where all the contributions are in English, which is also a colonial language if you go to see. So why didn't this happen with Portuguese in Goa, Daman, Diu, etc.? What do you think? It's not in the book or anything.
Sorry, why didn't what happen?
Why didn't Portuguese continue as a language in Goa, just like English continued in British India?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Again, I spoke about the what was it? The institutional break, as in, uh, it was after 1961. It was not taught in the schools anymore, and um, English sort of came into it. There was a very sudden transition to English that happened after 1961, and um, yeah, it's a complex reality, but I think that I guess I don't really have an exact answer why it didn't happen, but it um, it was sort of a transition was made, and during the 60s, 70s, the political climate was also very harsh, as in uh, it was really the historian Teotonio has mentioned has mentioned this, that it, there were two groups, so-called there were two groups at loggerheads, the so-called anti-Portuguese groups and the pro-Portuguese groups, and these were just labels that were given to people, so people were just labeled as being pro-Portuguese, and that was as bad of an insult as one could get at the time. So there was really almost like a cultural suppression going on of things that were Portuguese, and that is a reality that also shows up across some of the stories, a few of them in the book. So yeah, I think it was a hostile environment for Portuguese, and it was replaced by English. And yeah, it's a complex question to answer, really, but I hope that does some justice to it.
Sandra, go ahead, please. If Sandra had already raised the hand, and then Mr. Lobo, okay? So Sandra, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think that Jeanette was before me, or am I wrong? Anyway,
No.
I just wanted to add something to this conversation. I believe that there were two situations that we should take into account with this transition from Portuguese to English. One is that the fact that differently from what happened with British decolonization, it was not a negotiated decolonization. So it was a rupture. So it was complete. So there was a big anti-Portuguese sentiment running out at that time. And I was born after the 61. I was born in 63, and I lived as a child in Goa, but I had elder sisters and a brother, and it became in our family a generational conflict because the younger generations wanted to demark from that Portuguese past, from that colonial past, and so they, of course, they adopted English as a confrontational um, language within the household, and also a way of connecting to post-colonial Goa. And then there was this question of Goa being integrated in a much faster country, which has had as lingua franca English language. So I think that is very prevailing and very important because in the end, people need to be practical, and a country needs to have common languages for people to understand each other. And Portuguese was very important within this Portuguese colonial situation, but it was just not, it lost that importance within a vast Indian environment. I think that was important. I don't want to take more time.
Thank you, Sandra. So now we have Mr. Antonio Lobo, then Sharmila, and then Luis. So, Mr. Lobo, go ahead.
Right. I wanted to address myself to some of the comments made by Jojo with regard to the fact that he said that the Portuguese speakers were a sort of a different and an upper caste. Now, one has to keep in mind that the Portuguese language was the language of study of those people who wish to go into the Portuguese education system. We had, parallel to it, we had the English schools, which many Goans used to opt for. Now, if one speaks in terms of castes, in terms of the language, which I find the comment rather unusual, one has to also consider that those people who spoke English during those days also used to consider themselves a different class of people. I do not know whether, I think the class would be better fitted or better suited to the discussion that we have now. Those who did not opt for Portuguese were those people who were basically looking to the outside world, outside Goa, for employment. And this is a fact because the English language assumed importance during the Portuguese days because of the fact that Bombay was nearby, which used to provide employment to a lot of Goans. And we had the entire East Africa, which was at that time administered by the British. And this movement towards the English language actually started before before the beginning of the 20th century. It started from the late 1800s and went on. Unfortunately, in Goa, the employment was mainly restricted to government jobs and maybe some others for the purpose of teachers in primary schools and at the higher level, such as Liceu and the technical schools. But apart from that, the employment sphere was mainly amenable to studies in the English language. Now, with the respect to the fact or the absence of it, that Jojo has mentioned, one has to keep in mind that people who spoke Portuguese did not consider themselves to be an upper caste. But the fact remained that when you speak Portuguese in the house, in the home, it is an automatic thing for one to start speaking in that language. Maybe it was a reverse caste, that the people who considered these others who spoke Portuguese took themselves away from the groups that spoke in Portuguese, who might not have been doing it on purpose, but were doing it out of sheer habit. Like it happened with me when I went from the Portuguese education to English education. I began by going to the 10th standard of SSC. At that time, we had 11 standards for SSC. I could not understand a word of English. It was terrible and it was traumatic, to say the least. Then subsequently, somehow or other, I passed SSC and went onwards to college. And there, again, we had companions who studied together in the Portuguese education, who, when we used to come together, we used to change automatically to Portuguese language. And given the fact that we were uncomfortable with the English language, that was something which was automatic. Now, I would say that Jojo perhaps has quite a distorted view of this particular aspect, and I would perhaps like to speak with him in private if the opportunity ever arose, because I would like to give him various examples of why my view differs from his. Now, with regard to the question raised by Madam Heta Pandey, I would like to say that as Ms. Sandra Lobo said, she's very right when she says that the atmosphere from 1962 onwards was hostile, to say the least. And I remember, as a child, I was around 12 years at that particular point of time. The antipathy towards the Portuguese-speaking world was such that I used to literally get scared to speak in Portuguese. And this is the atmosphere which was encouraged, actively encouraged by the political class that ultimately won the elections. And I'm speaking about specifically, because these things have to be mentioned, they cannot be hidden. I'm speaking specifically about the very first government formed in Goa under the regime of Dayanand Bandurkar. These were the people, Marathi lobby, which wanted to see that Goa as a political entity would disappear forever. And they promoted actively the merger of Goa into the Maharashtra state. They wanted to see that Goa did not survive at all, and that whatever traces were left of the Portuguese colonial past would be wiped out. This was the atmosphere in which the Portuguese language could not survive. The schools were encouraged to stop teaching Portuguese. It is only when there were active people who would petition the government, continue with the Portuguese language, such as the case where my mother, because of my younger sibling, who had already started studying the Portuguese, had started the primary school, petitioned the government to continue with the Portuguese education in the primary school. And after she was able to prove that there were a minimum of 20 students willing to learn in that language, that Portuguese education was allowed to continue in the primary school at Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lobo, for your contribution. Yes, and having a direct experience of the language and what happened at the time. Aren, would you like to make some comments?
No, not really, but I think it's an interesting point. Yes, it's true that the atmosphere was bad, and I'd like to add that maybe it was only after 1975 when relations between Portugal and India resumed that it slowly started to thaw. We can say that. And later on, when Fundação Orient and Camões eventually set up in Goa in 1986, 1987. I may be getting the years a little bit wrong, but around that time, that Portuguese teaching resumed as an optional language, at least in the schools. Yeah.
Thank you. So look, we have now a comment from Luis, Sharmila, Sushila, and Edgar in that order. And then Natasha. Natasha, I have not forgotten you, but we have many questions. You have already asked another one. So perhaps at the end, no doubt that Aren will answer you. So Luis, would you like to make your comment?
Yes, I think the question that the lady raised regarding Portuguese versus English was interesting, especially in light of the fact that the Portuguese were in India much longer than the British. They were the first to come in, the last to leave. And secondly, because of the fact that the Portuguese were much more, let's say, um, they were not discriminating against the natives like the British did, considered themselves superior and in fact uh, treated the Indians very badly. So from that point of view, there should have been more reason for the Portuguese to remain in place rather than English. But I think the reasons why it did not happen, my theory, I may be wrong, but my theory is that perhaps because in Goa we had a feudal system in which uh, only certain people, and again, it's not caste, I think it was class, as somebody mentioned, Saloba mentioned, had access to higher education, and so Portuguese prevailed only amongst them, and the vast majority of the population were limited at the most to the primary education. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason was that, my theory again, that the territories held by the Portuguese were so small that they were engulfed by the rest of India when it was annexed to the Indian Union in 1961, and the educational system from the rest of India just overtook what was in Goa, especially having been the Portuguese schools having been closed by that time. That's it. Thank you.
Sharmila, would you like to add your comment and then Aren can answer both of you? Thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you for that, Cielo. What I wish to mention is, after 1961, I have seen government bulletins which were in the bilingual language, Portuguese and English for a while. So I personally feel that maybe for the next 20 years, 2 decades after the liberation, Portuguese continued. And it was only in the late 1980s that one sees a decline. Because if you even make a, survey the number of students taking Portuguese in schools and colleges, it was quite high once upon a time. In the 80s, it was quite a substantial number. After that, you see a decline. This is what I want to mention. I also agree that there was no support for the language. We also have to remember that Goa, which comprises of the territory that we have, the Novas Conquistas, which was a very large expanse of territory, that was, their Portuguese really did not make progress. So for them, I I suppose it didn't really make an impact. Portuguese concentrated more on the Welsh conquistadors, not on in the Norvish conquistadors. So it didn't really make an impact in the new conquests of Goa. So they didn't really, bother to promote it. The administration probably did not really bother to promote the language because it had anyways not spread to such an extent. This is what I wish to say. And the rest, I do agree with, many of the things said over here. It has not been encouraged. And perhaps also because English has a wider reach, a connectivity. Portuguese speaking, community is not as extensive as English. So probably that was, one of the reasons why it phased out eventually and there's a revival now. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamila. Aren, would you like to answer, to comment?
Yeah, I think when it comes to Portuguese and Goa, yes, it's true that it's mainly in the Velhas conquistas, yes, the old conquests, and didn't spread so much through the new conquests, from what I know. I think when it comes to the number of students, there has been an uptick in the recent years in the number of students opting for Portuguese, and also, I'd like to add that, Goa is also a pretty good place for learning Portuguese. It has the only university in India which offers, a bachelor's and master's in Portuguese and Lusophone studies, which I can recommend their master's degree as being quite good at the Goa University, quite all-rounded. But yeah, to get back to the point, I think, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Anyways, we can move on in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Sushila, would you like to pose your question?
Yes, first of all, congratulations, Aren, and all the writers of this book for the very novel idea of putting an analysis of the Portuguese language down the years. Now, what I'd like to state is that, this is a very unknown, unspoken about fact of Goan colonial history, that there was a certain section of Goa which became victims of the anti-colonial ideology, so to say. For example, in my family, as my father wrote, he wrote against the Portuguese and the Portuguese government, and he wrote articles in colonial papers. So in our family, the Portuguese language was banned. The church was not, my father did not get married in the Roman Catholic Church before 61. He got married later. So there was a victimization of a particular generation of Goans, whom you can say are the children of freedom fighters. Wrongly or rightly, they believed that everything which was Portuguese was, to their mind, not right. So they didn't permit their children to learn the language. They didn't permit anything, the religious part of whatever was Portuguese was looked down upon. And therefore, these section became victims without realizing it. Both my parents knew Portuguese. Later on, my mother helped me in translating Portuguese documents. But unfortunately, my childhood was not allowed to learn the language.
Aren, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I don't have anything to say to that, but thank you for your kind words, and yes.
Okay, no problem. So Edgar, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Sure, thank you. What I see when I speak with the Goans, either here in the United States or in Portugal, is that they all say that our Goan culture is in crisis, that we are the last generation that can salvage our culture. The strong link about our culture probably is Portuguese, besides, our food and our costumes. But I think we should have uh, a more united Goans. Like we should participate more together in the our uh, those that are abroad, outside of Goa. Like in Portugal, they have Casa de Goa. Here we have Goan associations, and I belong to all of them. I know Casa de Goa in Portugal. They're making an effort to put them together. Unfortunately, I think they lost their building because they were about to build a metro there, but they're waiting for the government to give a building. So the Portuguese is the strong link for us, and I know that in Goa, there's an increased number of people that want to learn Portuguese. Aren's father, at one point about 2 or 3 years ago, started a chat, and from that chat, we developed a program to teach Portuguese. In the first group, we had 500 people, and immediately that increased to 3 groups because WhatsApp can only accept at the time 500 people. That was the maximum. So we had 3 groups. We had about 1,500 people interested in learning Portuguese. So there's that interest, but from the interest to learn itself, also it's a big step, because it involves an effort to learn Portuguese, and also it involves to have people around them that can speak Portuguese. Uh, yeah, that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Edgar. Yeah, it's an interesting point, and I think there are many people in Goa also who want to learn Portuguese, who really have a desire to learn Portuguese. And there are also many courses that are being offered by Fundação Orient and mainly Camões Goa University, all sorts of things. But I feel like there is a bit of a gap between what people want and how they want it accessibly. And transportation is a problem here in Goa. You might know it's a big problem. And so it's like there's a gap between the people who want Portuguese and how want to learn Portuguese and how accessible it is and easy it is for them to do so. So I feel like there's definitely there is a space to improve. Let's put it that way when it comes to the language in Goa. Yes.
Thank you.
Sandra,
Thank you.
Sandra, go ahead. And then Natasha, we will have your question.
This is not a question, it's just a comment. And it's something that I've been defending for many years, is that we have to, it would be useful to insist on the idea. I think it's useful to insist on the idea that Portuguese is a Goan language. And by that I mean that much of Goan written culture at least since the 19th century, but even before that, it was in Portuguese language. So it's a cultural loss that Goans cannot access this directly, this heritage. Of course, we have to also work on translation, but if we insist enough that on this idea that Portuguese is a Goan language, that will, I believe, it may also help interest of Goans towards the language, and also some editorial movement that may be sustainable, because it's very difficult to have editions in Portuguese language in Goa nowadays. I believe, because they wouldn't be very big success, but maybe some institutions could help on that. And that's what I wanted to say. And of course, Aren has done a marvelous work with this edition, and I'm very proud of being a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sandra. Yes, you raised some excellent points. I think, yes, we should, more Goans should come to recognize. I don't mean to say this in a condescending way, but we should claim our heritage. That I do think that Portuguese is and can be considered and should be considered as a Goan language, because, if we can consider English to be an Indian language, then Portuguese definitely should be considered a Goan language. And we already, it's so many things are part of our heritage as Goans. We consider the Sé Cathedral, the Basilica of Bom Jesus as part of our heritage. And similarly, Portuguese is, yes, definitely part of our heritage. I think also, to touch on another point you said about publishing in Portuguese, it's a very uh, uh, good area to sort of connect cultures together, especially between Goa and the Lusophone world. I think there's a lot of researchers on Portugal side, Portuguese researchers who do work in Indo-Portuguese studies, and also Goans who do work and Indians who do work in the same area. And I think translation and publishing is definitely a big way to connect everyone together, and it's definitely a bridge point. So I think it should be done more, and hopefully something can come of that in the future. Yes. Thank you
Excellent.
very much.
Well, we have two questions, one by Natasha that was pending, and then Janet. Go ahead, Natasha. Your question is, I can read the question. Have the authors made a mention or commented on the variations of the Portuguese that they spoke?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Dr. Natasha. Sorry to keep you pending for so long. Yes, I think that there are few varieties, uh, as in, we have Mr. Athos Fernandes, who talks about growing up in Daman and speaking Damanese Portuguese. And it's very interesting. He even gives an excerpt of a conversation in Damanese Portuguese and how it's different from, standard Portuguese. He mentions it being maybe more closer to archaic Portuguese, like from the time of Gil Vicente and such. But I think another interesting thing is he also rejects the idea of considering Damanese Portuguese as a Creole Portuguese. He doesn't really think that it should be called a Creole. And I think that's something interesting to think of, what we consider as variants, what we consider as languages, dialects, Creoles. It's interesting, yeah. Also, there's a lot of let's say, like, distinctions made between European Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese. Um, It's interesting because people have a complex view here in Goa on Brazilian Portuguese. Some people maybe don't look at it so they look at it as sort of being a different kind of Portuguese, different from what they speak, or maybe. Um, but it's interesting, very interesting. Dr. Nalini Souza talks about Goan words that are specific to Goan Portuguese, to the Goan variant of Portuguese. Yeah, I think we can take the next question. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And Natasha says, thank you for your insight. Congratulations once again, Aren. So,
Thank
and
you very
Janet tells
much.
me she didn't have a question, but Adelaide has a question. So, Adelaide, go ahead.
Okay. From what I heard and I know on my studies about Goa, I don't think the relation with Portuguese is a linear one. Not all hate, not all love, and as many aspects, especially after 61. I believe when Goans want to define their identity in India, in the subcontinent, they remember their cultural heritage, their Portuguese cultural heritage, and also all the diaspora to Africa. The liberation movements in Africa, many of them have Goans that were there, and Goan and Africans were influenced by Goa liberation or integration, whatever. So the diaspora is also continues the Portuguese language as a bridge. And what I saw is that there is a Portuguese, a Brazilian Portuguese, a Portuguese from Portugal, and a Portuguese from Africa, which is another as another music to the ears. It's really interesting the richness of all language, not only Portuguese. All language adapts and keep growing. So that's what I think that Portuguese can be in Goa, is also a language of knowledge of the past, but also in the present, of other perspectives. So thank you so much for your work. It's really original. It was a great idea. I only read Sandra's paper, and I enjoy it very much because it's an essay, but it's also a memory, memorialism. So it's really rich how you intertwine those plans in the book. So it's going to be very helpful for all of us. And I believe that the Portuguese is much more interesting to see the influence after 61 than before. For me, it's more interesting to analyze all the controversy around the language. It's really enrichment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind wishes. And yeah, it's a collective effort, really. I mean, I think the contributors and the authors to this book have done more work than I have in just telling their stories and sharing their unique perspectives. And so it's hugely the congratulations goes to them. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I think when it comes to the Portuguese language, uh, Professor Delphi da Silva, who was with me at the book release speaking, he mentioned that não há uma língua portuguesa, há línguas em português. That there isn't just one Portuguese language, there are languages in Portuguese. So yeah. Thank you very much again, yes.
Well, so we have no more questions. Helder, would you like to just close up the meeting and then I just say a few words? Thank you, Aren.
Yes, but I will speak in Portuguese, okay? Because
Okay, and then I speak in
about
English.
Portuguese, no?
Sim, sim, em português. Aí eu vou falar em portunhol, outra variante que tem que ser considerada.
Bom, eu vou falar em português porque para mim é melhor, eu falo muito mal inglês. Ah, e, eu gostei muito dessa sessão, enfim, também teria algumas questões, mas acho que não é o caso, porque o que mais me interessava aqui era também essa reunião. Muitos de vocês estão no livro, né? Estão contribuindo com isso. E é muito interessante também ver como vocês também dialogam, né, esse, o que eu estou querendo dizer é o seguinte, é que essa sessão vai fazer parte da documentação, porque é mais um documento para nós desta, dessa permanência do português, né, em Goa e agora, no fundo, passa a ser uma espécie de resistência da língua no universo goês, né? Então, eu, na verdade, queria agradecer a todos que tiveram né, a disponibilidade e a gentileza de participar dessa sessão. Ah, agradecer, sobretudo, ao Aren Noronha, que fez esse trabalho muito bacana, incrível, e que nos ajudará muito a entender melhor como é que a língua portuguesa ainda se mantém em Goa e que futuro ela pode ter ainda em Goa, né? Isso acho que é bastante importante. Muito obrigado, Ari, muito obrigado a todos os participantes. A Cielo, que é a minha chefe, ela acha que eu sou o chefe dela, mas eu acho que ela é minha chefe, porque você vê como ela faz o trabalho muito bem, muito melhor que eu poderia fazer. Então, nós temos aqui um talento, né, que nos move. E, e é isso, gente. Muito obrigado a todos, por essa excelente sessão.
Se eu puder fazer um comentário
Por
periférico,
favor, por
Claro.
favor.
não vou tomar muito tempo, só queria mandar um abraço para o Brasil. Queria comentar que eu, como goês, fui recebido de braços abertos quando eu cheguei lá, faz 62 anos, com a cara e coragem, como se diz no Brasil, com uma mão na frente e outra atrás.
Faz
Fui muito
isso.
bem recebido, portanto, estou muito agradecido e aproveito essa oportunidade para mandar um grande abraço para todo mundo aí nesse país tão bonito.
Muito
Muito obrigado.
obrigado. Muito obrigado e espero que, espero que a sua experiência se repita com outros imigrantes aqui no Brasil, né? Porque ultimamente também tem havido uma certa resistência por conta de um certo espírito anti-imigrante que tem é, se tornado hegemônico, mas aqui no Brasil a gente tem resistido bastante a isso e recebido os imigrantes de forma bastante cordial até o momento, com alguma estrutura, e espero que assim continue, né? Mas muito obrigado, Luiz, pelas palavras.
Que lo diga eu que sou uma imigrante no Brasil. Senor, we don't know your name. It appears cliente to us, but please go ahead.
Dr. Carlos, yes. Hi.
Ah,
Hola, Dr. Carlos. He's one
Hello.
of our writers in our book.
please, go ahead.
It was a bit late. My apologies. Because, can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I had some appointment. But I would like to compliment Aren for the meeting and the organizers. Okay. I have a few suggestions. One question. How good is Aren in his Portuguese?
He's wonderful.
It's wonderful.
He has to make an effort to command the Portuguese language. Why advise this? Because he's a new generation, you see, and he has to keep the flame of Portuguese in Goa. Why, you will ask me? One, because Goa is an opening to all Portuguese-speaking countries. They want to learn about Goa. They want to learn what the Portuguese did in Goa. They are very anxious to see about the Goan culture. So we have to keep the flame of Portuguese in Goa. Second, you see, the access. It is, if Goans learn Portuguese, the Portuguese speaking world is open to them. Brazil is one, Portugal is one, Angola, Mozambique, Macau, Timor. So we have to keep this flame of Portuguese, not forgetting our natural language which is Konkani. Okay, Anyhow, thank you for the opportunity of giving my suggestion, saying a greeting to my friend Luis, who is also on the meeting, Luis Figueiredo. Hi, Luis. Nice to see you here. And all the people of the group, greetings from Northeast Brazil. It is very similar to Goa. So if you ever come this side, you see a corner of Goa. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Muito obrigado. Thank you very much, Dr. Carlos. Yes, I agree with you very much. It's Goa's opening to the Lusophone world for if just we keep the Portuguese language alive and going here, there's a lot that we can do with it. I mean, just seeing how much Macau does with it, business with with the throughout the Lusophone world, with the Portuguese speaking Portugal, Brazil, Africa, it's really something. And the question I had in my mind was, why can't we do something similar here in Goa? I think that would be really beneficial, and also it would align well, I think, with everyone's, or rather, with a lot of people's hopes, maybe. Well, at least that was the idea, the hope. But yes, thank you very much. Dr. Carlos is a Goan in Brazil, a medical doctor, yes, and professor, one of our authors. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, Carlos.
Obrigada, obrigada.
Obrigado.
Well, just to finish the session, so apparently Portuguese is still in the DNA of all Goans, so Portuguese cannot die in Goa. As I always like to say, that even literature in the Portuguese language from Goa has not died, but it has taken other shapes, different shapes, but it's still very much alive through translation, critical work, works like Aren's, which is absolutely wonderful. And all the different stories in the book are real treasures. It's lovely to read your book, Aren. Congratulations to you.
Thank you
and
very
all the
much.
people who contributed to the book. It's very, very nice. It's a pleasure to read it.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much to Pensando Goa and Dr. Helder and Dr. Cielo for having me here today. It's really a great honor for me. Thank you.
The honor is all ours. Well,
Bye.
people, see you all. Até a próxima.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. See you
Bye-bye.
all.
Deus,
Thanks
até a
all.
próxima.
Obrigado.
Bye.
Até.